It's Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorn. My first guest this week is Alexander Payne. Payne, of course, is an incredibly accomplished writer and director. His movies include Citizen Ruth, About Schmidt, Nebraska, Sideways, and, of course, Election.
I believe in the voters. They understand that elections aren't just popularity contests. They know this country was built by people just like me, who work very hard and don't have everything handed to them on a silver spoon.
His latest film is Downsizing, which is available to buy in stores and online now. It's kind of Payne's first foray into science fiction in a way. The movie centers on Paul and Audrey, an average couple from Omaha, played by Matt Damon and Kristen Wiig. In an effort to combat overpopulation and global warming, a technology has been invented that shrinks people down to a size of about 5 inches. But of course, things don't go exactly as planned. Here's a bit of the beginning of the movie. Paul and Audrey are sitting down with a salesperson from a downsizing company, or like a downsizing retirement community called Leisureland. And she's giving them the rundown.
Taking a look at your current debt, your retirement, and your other savings, you are at $152,000 in equity. People, that is a very comfortable number.
Comfortable? That doesn't sound like nearly enough.
Yeah.
Well, no. See, you have to look at this column, Audrey. Equivalent value. In Leisureland, your $152,000 translates to $12.5 million to live on for life. I mean, come on.
Wow.
So, what do you think? Would the Regency level be your first choice, or should I show you something a little more deluxe?
Honey, why don't you just go ahead and pick? I just want you to be happy.
That's a good husband. Take a look at this.
Alexander Payne, welcome to Bullseye. I'm so happy to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
I was Googling around your name and whatnot, and I found this article from the LA Times from 1990 when you had just, your student film was just making the rounds on VHS of agents and development people and stuff like that. Did you have a plan to get to that when you were a young man? I think you were in your late 20s then.
Yeah, I was 29 when I graduated from film school. No, I came to film step by step by step. So, but specifically about your question, when I got out of film school in 1990 and had a hit student film, that's all I saw. That's what I hoped for. I didn't know what was going to happen after that, although I hoped that a first feature would happen soon thereafter. But when you're a film student, particularly a graduate student, one of the advantages of making a thesis film there is that it will be presented in a certain context and with certain packaging when you graduate. And then you hope for interest. And I had a lot of interest. I had kind of the dream film school graduate MFA scenario, which is I presented my film in that June at the UCLA end of the year screenings, and the next day I had 30, 40 messages on my answering machine, and within a month I had a Hollywood agent and an office on a lot and a writing directing deal, and that's rare, much hoped for and rare. And what you really can't plan for is that they always tell you, and even still later in life, I mean, this is something which continues throughout life. If you have a hit film, have a script ready for what you want to do next. And they drum that into the heads of graduate students. But almost nobody does that because you're so busy working on your thesis film and editing all night and then getting it, just getting it done that you really don't have time to write that feature script. I had an idea, and I pitched that idea, but that idea did not materialize as a feature until 11 years later it became About Schmidt.
So when and how did you decide to pursue this path, this career?
As I said before, I came to it bit by bit. I fell in love with movies when I was about 5, watching them, and becoming very, very keen to see as many movies as I could, particularly old movies, and I would seek them out on television.
So, I mean, did you have like a rep house nearby, a university theater or something sometimes?
had many things. Films were available on television. I had an 8mm projector, which my father had gotten from his restaurant business as a bonus from Kraft Foods, and I began collecting prints of silent films at around age 8. All my allowance money went to that, and by the time I was in my teens, it was a pretty good collection. And
because the projector didn't have wasn't capable of generating sound.
Correct. So you could also get silent versions of sound films. There used to be a company called Castle Films, and you'd get them at the camera store. And that's good for little kids. You get like a 12-minute version of Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein or something like that. But by the time I was 12, I had all of Charlie Chaplin's Mutual shorts and Buster Keaton shorts. And I had, you'd buy from a place called Black Hawk Films in Davenport, Iowa. Anyway, I don't want to bore you with that.
I love it. Were you like getting your parents to write a check and taking it to the post box?
I saved my allowance money, and I would go to the drugstore and buy money orders.
Yeah.
And the drugstore, our local drugstore, also had a post office, so I could buy a money order, send it off, all right there. As far as a rep house goes, in Omaha, there's a great museum called the Jocelyn Art Museum, and every Sunday for many years, one guy would curate 16mm reduction prints of classic films. And for many years, I went every single Sunday. I missed one.
What did you miss the one for?
Somehow my parents couldn't take me. I still remember the film I'm No Angel.
Check it out there. Do you think that your sensibilities were shaped at all by the fact that you watched all these silent films as a young man, and that you were not just, not just that you watched them, but also that you had to they must have been treasured possessions because you had to buy them yourself, like save money and send away for them and all of that stuff.
Absolutely correct. And they became my first film school because, as you say, I owned them. I watched them over and over and over again, and brought friends up into the attic where I had a screen set up and my little projection set up. And sometimes I even, in the basement, would open the house to neighbor kids and charge $0.25 to get in, and my parents would make popcorn and do that. So I wound up watching these films over and over and over again.
I like that you were becoming a service industry entrepreneur, like your parents. Like your father owned a big restaurant downtown when
Right.
you were very young. Like that was it was like a weird hustle. It's like, hey, what other children want to see The Passion of Joan of Arc?
Well, I didn't have Passion of Joan of Arc, but
Might have been a little too real.
I have to say, it was more fun, though, but my motives were perhaps purer. You just wish to share these things, to share the joy of those films. And they've continued to influence me, I think, to this day. I mean, I make talkies. I don't make silent films. But as spoken, as verbal as some of my films are, actually, as a director, I'm more interested in wordless passages and how bodies move in space, and both from watching silent films and also you learn this from Warner Brothers cartoons. The key is to be able, even though if your movie is a talkie, a deaf person or someone without, if you could turn down the volume on the film, could an audience member still tell more or less what's going on? That's still a good arbiter of how good a movie is. You want it, it's moving pictures.
I remember hearing you tell Terry Gross years ago on Fresh Air, not that many years ago, 5 years ago maybe, that you are an enthusiastic talker when you are directing, including when the cameras are rolling, and will talk people through physical things that you want to see on camera while they perform, which isn't, it's not extraordinarily unusual, but it's not everyone's method. The
only thing I'm missing is the megaphone.
Uh-huh.
The handheld megaphone.
You have the,
no, but a lot
you
of
have
people,
the riding pants and the safari jacket.
They're called jodhpurs.
Okay, thank you.
The jodhpurs. But I think it's more common. I mean, as you say, it's not extraordinarily uncommon, but a lot of directors will talk people through, or certainly nowadays where you can keep the camera running for a long time. All right, try that again, but do it this way, or try to get it, yeah.
Because, in Downsizing, there is a lot of silence. I mean, for a guy who makes a lot of talky movies, there's a lot of time spent, in the first act of the film as we learn about this downsizing process. There's a lot of time spent watching machines move around and watching people. The bit that I remember the most vividly is after everyone gets small, they have to go from a full-size hospital bed to a tiny hospital bed, or gurney maybe. And there's a scene where they get swept into
a spatula.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to say a pooper scooper with no bag. But yeah, either way.
Well, thanks for pointing that out, because that's my favorite scene in the film.
Really?
And it was the most fun to design and to direct and to score. The music, it turned out quite nice. And it's just a nice little, it's about 8 minutes, just a nice little ballet of a medical procedure.
I mean, it seems like you took a great amount of pleasure, especially for someone who had spent, from what I understand, like a decade working on this script, a great amount of pleasure in the non-talking mechanical parts of this, and human parts, but the silent, the non-dialogue parts.
Look, I made a movie called what's the name of it? The Descendants with George Clooney.
It's called The Descendants with George Clooney.
Takes place in Hawaii, and there's a lot of emoting. And here's a guy, his wife was cuckolding him, and she's now dying, and he's got to take care of these daughters, and he's got a land trust to deal with, and all the stuff you need to talk about, and that's what the meat of the film is. And the number one question I got from reporters or journalists or whatever you call people who ask you about film when you're done was, how did you get George Clooney to run funny? There's a silent sequence where he realizes his wife's been unfaithful, and he runs to friends, and I made a sequence of that. In the script it just said he runs down the street, but I made kind of a meal about it. And that's the number one question I got. How did you get George Clooney to run so funny? So people fall for that crap.
Do you think you're still as serious a film consumer now as you were when you were a teenager or a student?
Right now it comes in spurts, but yes, I watch a lot of film, even if I don't watch them all the way through. And I keep up with films, older films mostly. But for example, when I'm making a film, it's kind of hard to keep a steady diet of watching them. I have a 6-month-old baby right now, and it's been, but wait, get a load of this. So I do morning shift with the baby. My wife likes to sleep in, so, till like 8 or 9. So I've got the baby from 6 till 8 or 9, and, I feed her and play, and then we watch a movie. So I'm happy to say that her first movie we carved through this week was The Dirty Dozen, and she loved it. She loved watching the Jerrys get what was coming to them.
One of the things that you are good at, that not very many people are good at as a filmmaker, is being funny, and being funny in the context of a film where being funny is not the sole goal. I think there are plenty of funny movies that are released, and I think that, we've never met before, but if you knew me, you'd know that I value that very deeply.
Humor.
Yeah.
Yeah, big time.
I have a real fantasy in my head that you cast Will Forte in Nebraska because you thought MacGruber was so great.
I've still never seen MacGruber.
You should probably watch MacGruber.
I didn't see the movie, which Will Forte said, "Oh, you should see it." He goes, "It's a terrible movie. There's nothing good I can tell you about it, but it's funny."
What was the thing that I was just saying a second? Oh, there were so few people who even seemed to aspire to make a human emotional film that's funny.
Or at least with humor. I mean, when asked about many films, what did you think of this or what did you think of that? Very, very often I say, yeah, it was pretty good, but no jokes. Even 12 Years a Slave, not a single funny moment in it. Otherwise, fine film. But that's when I said, you know what? Excellent film, but no jokes. There has to be some humor, some opening, something. And I mean, another way I say it is that film, no matter what it's about, should be charming. Again, I don't want to say what a film should be. I want to be, democratic and Catholic about a film can be anything, absolutely anything. But in terms of what we're talking about, 2-hour narrative films, at least for my taste, I look for some even Michael Haneke's Amour has humor and charm. Even Schindler's List has humor and charm. You can kind of do anything, but at some point, give us a break, man. Just let us in.
In your career, as you mentioned, you had an unusual path in that you had a successful film in film school, a successful student film that got you work, and a ball has apparently, at least from the outside, been rolling ever since then. And
not quite that easy, but not quite that easy. But go ahead.
I guess I just wonder if you feel some pressure to keep that ball rolling. Like if you're the kind of guy who can rest or remove yourself or,
it's hard.
For that matter, fail.
It's hard. Well, look, it's not that you have pressure to keep the ball rolling. It's that you want to keep making movies. There is nothing more delightful. It's a joy. It's something, and even like we're here to promote Downsizing. Downsizing didn't do so well. It didn't have good box office. It got some stinky reviews. Whatever, next. I got a next movie in me. Another part of that I would say is, well, I mentioned I have a 6-month-old kid. That's forced me, right when Downsizing finished, by the way, that's forced me to take a break. Although I'm chomping at the bit, like, God, why can't I have those 3 hours to myself to... The other way it's a drag I used to be quite a voracious reader. When you start making films, you have to turn off that part of your brain. It's very hard to say, could this be a movie? Could this be a movie? And I often don't read books because I think, oh, they already made that into a movie. I should spend my time reading things now I don't. Of course, I still read literature and try to keep, catch up on the greats and so forth, but you've got that always going in your brain. When you're in film, your brain is always set to some frequency 24 hours a day.
Was it scary when Downsizing was less successful than your past films?
I wouldn't say scary. Is it a little disappointing? Sure, because of the amount of work, not just I, but a lot of people put into it. And, also just as far as career management goes, you don't want anybody around you to, Hyman Roth always made money for his partners.
I mean, the thing that it makes me think of is just the extent to which, as a filmmaker, you are dependent upon convincing people to give you tens of millions of dollars of their money to spend. Which is, we're sitting here and I own this studio. It costs $3,000.
Well, if they don't spend it on that, they're just going to spend it on something else.
Mm-hmm.
And even though Downsizing was disappointing at the box office, no one will sleep between sheets any less fine or order any less hamachi color, at the sushi bar. They'll get through it. It's a company. Now, and that's not, I don't wish to be flippant about that. I always want my pictures to make some money. What, do I care about their bank accounts? No. I care about my ability to continue making movies. So you got to keep that going. Scary? No. Disappointing? Yes. But, back to the old drawing board. And look, every filmmaker, you just keep it. Look at Robert Altman's career. I mean, forget the cost of Downsizing, but he just kept working. And or Woody Allen, some hit, some don't, but you're interested in the activity.
Well, I am so grateful that you took all this time to come be on Bullseye. It was really nice to meet you, and I've so admired your films for so many years.
Thanks a lot. And I'm happy to visit you guys in your awesome, they have an office here above MacArthur Park in Los Angeles with a phenomenal view. And your producer outside said that you guys have to move offices. So I'm happy I got to see this one.
And come see us in Chinatown, knock on wood.
Oh, good. That's cool.
Thank you, Alexander.
Thank you.
Alexander Payne. Downsizing is available to buy in stores now. You can also rent or buy it online, pretty much anywhere.